The scent of pine and ritual herbs hung thick in the air, mingling with something heavier, anticipation, perhaps, or simply the collective nervousness of 24 women primping for the most important night of their lives. I stood away from the others, my fingers trembling as I braided small white flowers into my blonde hair. The mirror reflected a stranger, high cheekbones dusted with borrowed rouge, eyes wide with fear rather than excitement. This wasn't how I had imagined my mating ceremony would feel. "Elise, you're going to snap those stems if you keep shaking," my friend Mira whispered, appearing behind me like a specter in the dimly lit preparation tent. Her own dark hair was elaborately styled, her dress cut to emphasize curves I could never hope to match. "Breathe. It's just a ceremony." But we both knew she was lying. The autumn moon mating ceremony wasn't just anything. It was everything in our pack, the night when eligible females presented themselves to potential mates, when alliances were forged, when futures were decided. And this year, rumors swirled that Alaric Blackmore himself, the Alpha King who ruled over all 7 territories, would be in attendance. "I shouldn't be here," I murmured, more to myself than to Mira. My fingers closed around the small silver pendant hanging at my neck. My mother's last gift before she died, a crescent moon with a tiny wolf howling at its curve. "I'm not like the rest of you," Mira's reflection frowned at mine. "Because you're only half shifter, Elise, you've earned your place here as much as anyone, more even. After what you did for the Western Pack during the epidemic, that was just herbs and stubbornness." I cut her off, unwilling to be reminded of those dark days when the fever had swept through our territories. I'd lost my mother to it, and in my grief and rage had thrown myself into finding a treatment. The fact that it had worked was more luck than skill. Nobody remembers that now anyway. A bell tolled outside, its deep reverberation silencing the chatter throughout the tent. Mira squeezed my shoulder and whispered, "They'll remember when you walk out there tonight." I nodded, though I knew better. In a room full of wolves, I was barely more than human. My mother had fallen in love with a human traveler, and while I'd inherited enough of her wolf blood to be considered pack, I couldn't shift. I couldn't run with them under the moon. I was something in between, tolerated rather than accepted. The preparation tent emptied as the women filed out in order of rank and bloodline. I would be last, of course, the half-blood with no family name worth mentioning. I smoothed down the simple silver dress I'd sewn myself, took one last look at the stranger in the mirror, and followed. The clearing was transformed. Hundreds of lanterns hung from the ancient pines, casting golden light over faces I'd known all my life. The packs had gathered in their finest. Furs and leathers for the traditionalists, sleek modern attire for others. A massive bonfire roared at the center, and around it, platforms had been arranged where each woman would stand for her presentation. My eyes were drawn immediately to the raised dais where the pack leaders sat. 5 alphas from our regional packs, their seconds beside them, all watching with calculated interest as daughters and sisters and nieces were presented. But it was the 6th seat that made my breath catch. Larger than the others, carved from a single piece of ancient oak, and occupied by a man I'd only glimpsed once before. Alaric Blackmore, the Alpha King, looked bored. Even from this distance I could see the restless tap of his fingers against the armrest, the slight tilt of his head that suggested he was enduring rather than enjoying the proceedings. Dark hair fell across his forehead, partially obscuring eyes that were said to shift from gray to silver when he transformed. His face was all angles and shadows, beautiful in the way predators are beautiful, a beauty that warns rather than welcomes. One by one, the women took their places on the platforms. Names were called, lineages recited, talents praised. Some danced, others sang. A few, the strongest shifters, partially transformed to display magnificent fur patterns along their arms or backs, drawing appreciative murmurs from the crowd. When Mira's turn came, she stepped onto her platform with grace, her name announced with a long list of prestigious ancestors. She smiled at the audience, confident and radiant, then performed a traditional dance that had been passed down through generations of her family. The applause was enthusiastic, and I spotted at least 3 eligible males from prominent families watching her with undisguised interest. Then, impossibly soon, it was my turn. "Elise Winters," the announcer called, his voice noticeably less enthusiastic. daughter of the late Serena Winters and... A slight hesitation. James Winters of the human settlement beyond the Western Ridge. The silence that followed felt heavier than any sound could have been. I stepped forward on legs that threatened to buckle, mounting the last platform with all the dignity I could muster. The silver dress caught the firelight as I moved, and for a moment, I imagined it made me look ethereal rather than out of place. That illusion shattered when I heard the first snicker from somewhere in the crowd. Then another. My ears burned hot with shame, but I kept my chin up as I'd promised myself I would. I had prepared no dance, no song, only myself, honest and unadorned. Elise is a skilled healer, the announcer continued, clearly struggling to find something noteworthy to say. Her remedies were instrumental during the fever outbreak 3 winters past. More whispers rippled through the crowd. I caught fragments. Half-breed, and barely has the scent. And what is she even doing here? My mother's pendant felt suddenly heavy against my skin. I closed my eyes briefly, remembering her words on the day she'd given it to me. Your heart is your strength, little one. When others run with the pack, you'll run with your heart. When I opened my eyes again, I found myself looking directly at the Alpha King. His expression had changed, the boredom replaced by something I couldn't name. Curiosity, perhaps, or simple surprise that something had finally broken the monotony of the evening. Our gazes locked for one breathless moment, and I felt a strange twist in my stomach, like standing at the edge of a precipice. The moment broke when the announcer asked me to demonstrate a talent or quality that would make me worthy of consideration as a mate. I had planned to speak about the healing properties of various plants I'd discovered, but looking out at those faces, some curious, some hostile, most simply indifferent, the words died in my throat. Instead, I reached for my pendant and held it up, the silver catching the firelight. I have no illustrious bloodline to recite, I said, my voice softer than I'd intended. I cleared my throat and continued more strongly. I cannot shift or run with the pack under the moon, but I can heal. I can listen when others only want to speak. I can see beauty in what others overlook. I lowered the pendant. That is all I have to offer. The silence that followed was broken by a laugh, sharp and cutting, from somewhere near the front. More joined in, a ripple of amusement spreading through the gathering. I should have remained dignified, should have stood tall until dismissed. Instead, anxiety coursed through me like electricity, and as I turned to step down from the platform, my foot caught on the hem of my dress. I stumbled forward, arms flailing, and fell hard onto the packed earth of the clearing. The laughter exploded around me, no longer restrained. My cheeks burned as I pushed myself up on scraped palms, bits of dirt clinging to the silver dress I'd spent weeks perfecting. This is why humans don't belong in wolf ceremonies, someone called out, loud enough to be heard over the laughter. I wanted to disappear, to sink into the ground or run into the darkness of the surrounding forest. But before I could gather myself enough to stand, a hush fell over the clearing, sudden and complete, like a blanket of snow muffling all sound. A pair of boots had appeared in my field of vision, expensive boots of soft black leather, meticulously crafted. My eyes traveled up, taking in dark trousers, a formal jacket adorned with silver symbols of rank, and finally, the face that had been watching me from the dais. The Alpha King stood before me, his expression unreadable. The entire gathering seemed to hold its breath as he extended his hand to me, a hand marked with the scars of countless battles, calloused from a life of warfare and leadership. I stared at it, uncomprehending. This was not how the ceremony worked. The women presented themselves, then mingled with potential suitors afterward. The alpha leaders certainly didn't leave their seats, and they absolutely didn't offer assistance to clumsy half-bloods who had just humiliated themselves. Yet there he stood, Alaric Blackmore, the most powerful alpha in 7 territories, his hand outstretched to me in absolute silence. My heart hammered against my ribs as I placed my trembling hand in his. His fingers closed around mine, warm and strong, and he pulled me effortlessly to my feet, up close. His eyes weren't the cold gray I'd expected, but a storm cloud silver with flecks of blue around the iris. They studied me with an intensity that made me want to look away, but something held my gaze steady. "Thank you," I whispered. the words barely audible even to my own ears. The Alpha King said nothing. He simply inclined his head slightly, still holding my hand, and the gesture contained such unexpected gentleness that I felt tears threaten at the corners of my eyes. Then, as the entire pack watched in stunned silence, he raised my hand to his lips and pressed a kiss to my knuckles, the traditional acknowledgement of a potential mate. The collective gasp that rippled through the gathering seemed to suck all the oxygen from the clearing. I stood frozen, my hand still held in the Alpha King's, my mind refusing to process what had just happened. This was impossible. This was a mistake, or a cruel joke. Any moment now, he would drop my hand and laugh along with everyone else, but Alaric Blackmore didn't laugh. His eyes remained fixed on mine, searching for something I couldn't name. Then he leaned closer, his breath warm against my ear. "Walk with me," he said, his voice low and rough, like stone dragged across velvet. It wasn't a request. Even I, with my diluted wolf blood, could sense the command beneath the words. No one refused the Alpha King. I nodded mutely, and he tucked my hand into the crook of his arm, turning us away from the platforms, away from the stunned faces and widening eyes. As we walked toward the edge of the clearing, I caught glimpses of the reactions around us. The elder council members exchanged urgent whispers. The other eligible females stared with expressions ranging from shock to outrage. Mira's eyes were wide with disbelief, but she offered me the smallest of encouraging smiles. And Nathan, the alpha of our western pack, looked as though he'd been struck between the eyes. We reached the tree line, where the golden glow of the lanterns gave way to cool darkness. Only then did the murmuring begin behind us, a swelling tide of confusion and speculation that I was grateful to leave behind. The forest welcomed us with its familiar scent of pine and earth and the slight chill of early autumn. I shivered, partly from the drop in temperature and partly from the surreal situation I found myself in. "You're cold," the Alpha King stated. Before I could protest, he had shrugged out of his formal jacket and draped it over my shoulders. The weight of it was surprising, as was the warmth that still lingered from his body. It smelled of wood smoke, pine, and something uniquely him, wild and controlled all at once. "I don't understand," I finally managed to say, my voice small in the vastness of the forest. Why would you choose you?" He finished my stumbling question with a directness that made me flush. His stride was measured as we followed a narrow path deeper into the trees, forcing me to quicken my steps to keep pace. "I haven't chosen anyone yet. I merely expressed interest." "But why express interest in me? I'm not—" I gestured vaguely at myself, at the dirt still clinging to my once beautiful dress, at everything I was not. He stopped so abruptly that I nearly collided with him. When he turned to face me, moonlight filtered through the canopy above us, painting silver streaks across his features. For a long moment, he simply looked at me, as though I were a puzzle missing pieces. "What's your name again?" he asked. I blinked in surprise. "Elise. Elise Winters." "Elise." He said my name carefully, testing the shape of it. "Do you know why I attended this particular ceremony, Elise?" I shook my head. "I've attended 17 similar gatherings across the territories in the past month. 17 nights of watching females preen and perform, reciting bloodlines like grocery lists." A note of weariness crept into his voice. "The council insists I take a mate before winter. Something about stability for the alliance, a strong union to face the threat from the southern territories. I knew about the tensions with the southern packs. Everyone did. They had rejected the alliance that Alaric had spent years building, preferring isolation and the old ways. Rumors of border skirmishes had reached even our remote western pack. "So you're... what? Selecting breeding stock?" The words came out sharper than I'd intended. Months of frustration with the entire mating system suddenly finding voice. To my surprise, his lips quirked into something almost like a smile. "That's how most approach it. The ideal combination of bloodline, beauty, and political advantage." He resumed walking, slower now so that I could easily keep pace. which makes me wonder why a half-human healer with no political connections would present herself at all. The question stung, though I knew he hadn't meant it to. It wasn't my idea. Nathan, our alpha, insisted. Said everyone of age should participate, no exceptions. I think he hoped I might match with someone from another pack. Solve the Elise problem once and for all. The Elise problem? One dark eyebrow arched upward. I sighed, pushing a low-hanging branch out of my path. I don't quite fit anywhere. Not human enough for the settlement, not wolf enough for the pack. After my mother died, Nathan took me in because she'd been his father's cousin. But I'm a complication. A reminder of things most wolves would rather forget. We walked in silence for several minutes. The sounds of the forest a gentle backdrop to my racing thoughts. I kept waiting for him to release my arm, to realize his mistake and return to the ceremony. Instead, he led me toward a small clearing where a fallen log provided a natural bench beside a stream that glittered in the moonlight. "Sit," he said, and again, it wasn't a request. I obeyed, perching on the smooth wood and arranging his jacket more securely around my shoulders. He remained standing, looking out over the water with his hands clasped behind his back, the very picture of contained power. "Tell me about the fever outbreak," he said suddenly. "The announcer mentioned your role. The request caught me off guard. It was 3 years ago. It started in the human settlement but spread quickly to the pack. High fever, delirium, then a deep sleep most never woke from. The memories rose unbidden, the makeshift hospital in the pack hall, the smell of sickness, the crying of children as parents slipped away. My mother was one of the first wolves to fall ill. I couldn't save her." I swallowed hard against the lump forming in my throat. "After she died, I kept working, trying different combinations of herbs, different treatments. There's a plant that grows only on the north bank of the river, with small purple flowers. Humans call it wolfsbane, ironically enough. In very small doses, mixed with willow bark and honey, it brought down the fever. It wasn't a cure exactly, but it gave people's bodies time to fight." "And you discovered this yourself?" Something in his tone had changed, a note of genuine curiosity replacing the careful neutrality. I nodded. "My mother was teaching me about herbs before she died, and I can sense things sometimes, about plants, what they might do, how they might help. It's the only wolf gift I seem to have inherited." He turned to look at me then, his eyes reflecting the moonlight. "How many lives did you save?" "I don't know. Dozens, maybe. We lost 27 from the pack, 18 from the settlement. It could have been much worse." "Yet, you speak of it as just herbs and stubbornness," he said. And I realized with a start that he must have overheard my conversation with Mira in the preparation tent. Wolf hearing, of course. I'd forgotten how sharp it could be. "It wasn't enough to save my mother," I replied softly, looking down at my hands folded in my lap, "or the others who were lost. You have a healer's heart," he observed, "always counting those you couldn't save, rather than those you did." Something about the way he said it, not as criticism but as simple truth, made me look up at him again. He had moved closer, studying me with that same intense gaze that seemed to see beneath my skin. "Why did you bring me out here?" I asked, unable to bear the mystery any longer. "Surely you don't actually intend to court me?" A slight smile touched his lips again, transforming his severe features into something almost approachable. "And why would that be so unthinkable?" "Because I'm half human, because I can't shift, because there are a dozen more suitable choices back at that ceremony, any one of whom would strengthen your political position." I stood, suddenly agitated. "Because this makes no sense." He stepped closer, and I fought the instinct to back away. Up close, he was even more intimidating, tall and broad-shouldered, with the coiled readiness of a predator in every movement. Yet I didn't feel afraid exactly. Something else fluttered in my chest, something I didn't dare name. "I've spent 10 years building this alliance," he said, his voice low. 10 years of negotiations and compromises, of settling disputes and earning trust. "Do you know what I've learned, Elise Winters?" I shook my head. "That strength comes in many forms, and the most obvious is rarely the most valuable." His eyes traveled over my face, lingering on my lips before returning to meet my gaze. I saw you standing on that platform, watching you face their judgment without flinching. Then I saw you fall and rise again, dignity intact despite their laughter. There is power in that kind of resilience. Power I need. I don't understand, I whispered, though part of me was beginning to. The southern packs grow more hostile by the day. There are rumors they've found new allies. Humans with weapons and technology beyond anything we've seen. We stand at the edge of a conflict that could destroy everything I've built. His jaw tightened. The council wants me to choose a mate with pure blood and ancient lineage to appease the traditionalists. But what we need now isn't more of the same thinking that has divided us for generations. He reached out, slowly, deliberately, and tucked a strand of my blonde hair behind my ear. The simple touch sent a shock through my system, like stepping into sunlight after months of shadow. We need bridges, not walls, he continued. Someone who understands both worlds, someone who sees value in what others discard. My mind raced, trying to process his words. You can't mean... I'm not proposing marriage on the spot, little wolf, he said, a hint of amusement coloring his tone. I'm proposing possibility, a chance to see what might grow between us. Before I could respond, a howl split the night, close and urgent. Alaric's head snapped up, his body instantly alert. A moment later, another howl answered from a different direction, and then another. What's happening? I asked, alarm rising in my throat. Trouble, he replied grimly. Stay here. He turned to go, but I grabbed his arm without thinking. Wait. If something's wrong, I should help. I have medical supplies in my cabin. It's not that kind of trouble. His expression had darkened, the brief warmth I'd glimpsed now completely gone. There are intruders in our territory. Southern wolves, from the scent. A cold fear gripped me. The southern packs were known for their brutality, their refusal to adapt to changing times. If they had dared to breach the borders of an allied pack during a sacred ceremony, with the Alpha King himself present. They wouldn't, I whispered. Not during a mating ceremony. It violates every ancient law. They would if they knew I was here. His voice was hard as stone. If they saw an opportunity to strike at the heart of the alliance. Another howl. This one cut abruptly short in a way that made my skin crawl. Alaric swore under his breath, then fixed me with a penetrating stare. I need to go. My guards are already responding, but I must lead the defense. He gripped my shoulders, his fingers pressing into my flesh with controlled urgency. Listen carefully, Elise. Follow the stream back toward the pack grounds, but don't return to the clearing. Go to your cabin, lock the doors, and stay there until someone comes for you. Do you understand? I nodded, fear and confusion warring within me. But what about the others? Mira, the elders. The warriors will protect them. He was already backing away, his body tense with the need to run, to fight. I'll find you when this is over. Promise me you'll stay safe. I promise, I whispered. He held my gaze for one more heartbeat, something fierce and unreadable flashing in his eyes. Then he turned and sprinted into the forest, his form blurring at the edges as the shift began to take him, and within moments, he was gone. Leaving me alone in the moonlight, wearing his jacket and carrying a promise I wasn't sure he intended to keep. I stood frozen for several heartbeats, staring at the spot where Alaric had disappeared into the darkness. The forest had gone eerily silent, as if holding its breath. Even the stream beside me seemed to quiet its burbling. Then came the sounds, distant at first, then alarmingly close. Growls and snarls, the crash of bodies through underbrush. A human scream cut short. My heart thundered in my chest, urging me to run, to hide, to follow Alaric's instructions and flee to the safety of my cabin. But I couldn't make my feet move in that direction. Back there, at the ceremony, were people I cared about. Mira, who had stood by me when others turned away. Old Jacob, who had taught me which herbs to gather under which moon. Children who had no way to defend themselves against southern wolves known for their savagery. I closed my eyes and pressed my palm against my mother's pendant, feeling its familiar contours against my skin. Your heart is your strength, she had told me. Right now, my heart was pulling me back toward the danger, not away from it. "I'm sorry, Alaric," I whispered to the empty air. Then I gathered the hem of my silver dress and began to run, not along the stream as he had instructed, but cutting through the forest on a direct path back to the ceremonial clearing. The undergrowth caught at my dress, tearing the delicate fabric I'd worked so hard to perfect. Branches whipped against my face and arms. I stumbled over roots and rocks hidden in the darkness, kept my balance only through sheer determination. The sounds of conflict grew louder with every step, spurring me to move faster despite the burning in my lungs. I burst from the tree line at the far edge of the clearing and immediately ducked behind a massive pine, my breath coming in ragged gasps as I surveyed the chaos before me. The beautiful ceremony had dissolved into a battlefield. Tables were overturned, lanterns shattered, their flames spreading to nearby decorations. In the center, where the bonfire still blazed, wolves fought in both human and shifted forms. I could distinguish our pack members by their ceremonial clothing, now torn and bloodied, while the invaders wore dark, practical garments or fought in their wolf forms, larger than our wolves, with coats so black they seemed to swallow the firelight. My eyes frantically searched the melee for familiar faces. I spotted Nathan, our alpha, his formal attire discarded, fighting back to back with his second against 3 massive southern wolves. Several of our warriors formed a protective ring around the elders and younger women, shepherding them toward the pack hall, a sturdy stone building that could be defended. Relief flooded me when I saw Mira among them, her beautiful dress torn at the shoulder, but otherwise appearing unharmed. But where was Alaric? I scanned the clearing again, anxiety mounting when I couldn't locate him among the fighters. A piercing howl drew my attention to the raised dais where the pack leaders had sat. Atop it stood a wolf larger than any I'd ever seen, silver gray in the firelight. His powerful jaws locked around the throat of a black southern wolf. With a vicious shake of his head, he ended his opponent's life, then leapt to engage 2 more who rushed to avenge their fallen packmate. Alaric. It had to be. Even in wolf form, he moved with the same controlled power I had sensed in his human body. He fought with a lethal efficiency that was both terrifying and mesmerizing, each movement precise and purposeful. For a moment, I forgot the danger, transfixed by the sight of him in his true form, magnificent and deadly. Then a snarl from much closer snapped me back to my senses. I turned, the blood freezing in my veins as I found myself face to face with a southern wolf who had apparently circled behind our defenses. He was still in human form, a tall man with a jagged scar bisecting his face from forehead to chin. His eyes gleamed with feral hatred as he assessed me, clearly determining I was no threat. His lips curled into a cruel smile. "Well, what do we have here?" he hissed, stepping closer. "A little human girl wandering into wolf business?" I pressed my back against the tree, frantically searching for a weapon, an escape route, anything. But I knew I couldn't outrun a wolf, and there was nothing nearby I could use to defend myself. "I'm Pack," I managed to say, my voice steadier than I expected. "Western Pack." He inhaled deeply, his nostrils flaring. "You smell wrong. Half-breed, then." His smile widened, revealing teeth too sharp for his human form. "Even better. Your kind are an abomination, a dilution of what wolves should be." He lunged forward, grabbing my arm with bruising force. I cried out, more in shock than pain, and tried to twist away. His other hand clamped over my mouth, cutting off my scream. "The Alpha King has interesting taste," he said, his eyes taking in Alaric's jacket still draped around my shoulders. "I wonder what he sees in you. Perhaps I should find out before I kill you." Terror surged through me, clearing my mind with crystalline focus. I went limp in his grasp, as if surrendering. When his grip loosened slightly in response, I drove my knee upward with all my strength, connecting solidly with his groin. He doubled over with a howl of pain and rage. I tore myself from his grip and ran toward the center of the clearing, toward the fighting, toward where I'd last seen Alaric. Behind me, I heard the wet, cracking sounds of my attacker shifting forms, followed by the pound of heavy paws on earth. "Help!" I screamed, knowing I couldn't outrun him, knowing I had only seconds. "Someone help!" I risked a glance over my shoulder and immediately wished I hadn't. The wolf pursuing me was massive, his fur black as pitch, his eyes glowing amber with murderous intent. His jaws were open, ready to close around my fleeting life. Time seemed to slow. I could see everything with unnatural clarity. The individual flames of the bonfire, the faces turned toward my desperate cry, the terrible beauty of the death racing toward me. I thought of my mother, wondered if I would see her soon, if she would be proud of me for trying to help rather than hide. Then a silver blur crashed into my pursuer, sending both wolves tumbling in a snarling, snapping tangle of fur and fangs and rage. Alaric had heard my cry. Alaric had come, but he wasn't alone in the fight now. 3 more southern wolves converged on the spot, clearly recognizing the Alpha King and seizing the opportunity to eliminate their greatest threat. I watched in horror as they circled, coordinating their attack with a precision that spoke of careful planning. This was no random raid. They had come for Alaric specifically, had perhaps been waiting for a moment when he might be separated from his personal guard, and I had inadvertently provided exactly that opportunity. Guilt and fear paralyzed me as I watched the uneven fight unfold. Alaric was a magnificent warrior, but even he couldn't fend off 4 opponents at once. As I watched, one of the southern wolves got past his defense and sank its teeth into his flank. Alaric's pained snarl cut through the air like a blade. I had to do something. I couldn't just stand there and watch him die defending me, but what could I, a half-human with no shifting ability, possibly do against 4 full-blooded wolves? My eyes fell on the bonfire, still blazing despite the chaos around it. Fire. Wolves feared fire. Without allowing myself time to reconsider, I grabbed a burning branch from the edge of the flames, ignoring the heat that singed my fingers. Then I ran toward the fight, waving the makeshift torch and screaming at the top of my lungs. "Get away from him!" I shouted, slashing the burning branch through the air. "Get back!" The unexpected attack startled the southern wolves, momentarily distracting them from their coordinated assault. One shied away from the flames, giving Alaric the opening he needed to tear into the throat of another, but I had drawn their attention now, and 2 of the remaining wolves turned toward me, their eyes reflecting the firelight with murderous intent. I backed away, still waving my flaming branch, trying to keep them at bay while Alaric dealt with the 3rd wolf. Fear made my movements jerky, unpredictable. One of the wolves lunged, and I swung the branch wildly, catching him across the snout with a shower of sparks. He yelped and retreated a few paces, but his companions circled to my left, looking for an opening. I was running out of options and time. The branch was burning down, getting closer to my hands with each passing second. Soon I would have nothing but ash to defend myself. A piercing whistle cut through the air, followed by a volley of arrows that thudded into the ground around the southern wolves, forcing them back. I turned to see a group of our pack warriors advancing, bows drawn and ready to loose another round. The southern wolves, recognizing that the tide had turned against them, began to retreat. The one Alaric had been fighting broke away, bleeding from multiple wounds, and ran toward the forest. The 2 facing me hesitated, clearly torn between finishing what they'd started and saving their own lives. Their decision was made for them when Alaric, still in his massive wolf form, positioned himself between me and the threat. His hackles raised, a continuous growl rumbling from his chest. The message was clear. To get to me, they would have to go through him, and he had just demonstrated exactly how that would end. With final snarls of frustrated rage, they turned and fled after their packmate, disappearing into the trees. All around the clearing, similar scenes were playing out as the southern wolves, outnumbered and losing ground, retreated into the night. For a moment, silence fell over the ceremony grounds, broken only by the crackle of flames and the pained sounds of the wounded. Then Alaric turned to me, his silver eyes blazing with an emotion I couldn't name. Blood matted his fur where the southern wolf had bitten him, but he stood tall, magnificent, even in injury. I dropped the remains of my burning branch, suddenly aware of the pain in my singed palms. "You're hurt," I said uselessly, taking a step toward him. A ripple passed through his massive form, and where the wolf had stood, the man now knelt, naked and bleeding but no less imposing. Warriors rushed forward, one draping a cloak over his shoulders while others formed a protective circle around us. "I told you to go to your cabin," he said, his voice rough with exertion, and what might have been concern. "You promised." "I couldn't leave everyone," I replied, suddenly feeling small and foolish under his intense gaze. "I thought I might be able to help." "By offering yourself as a target?" He stood, wincing slightly as the movement pulled at his wound. "You could have been killed." "So could you," I countered, surprising myself with my boldness. "They were waiting for you to be separated from your guard. They had a plan." Something shifted in his expression. Respect, perhaps? Or simple acknowledgement of the truth in my words. "Yes," he agreed, "they did." This was no random attack. Nathan approached us, his clothing torn and bloodied, but his stride steady. He bowed his head slightly to Alaric, then turned to me with a mixture of relief and exasperation. "Elise, thank the moon you're safe." His eyes took in Alaric's jacket still around my shoulders, the proximity in which we stood. "When I couldn't find you during the attack." "She was with me," Alaric cut in, his tone making it clear that no further explanation was required or would be forthcoming. Nathan nodded, though confusion lingered in his eyes. "The southern wolves are retreating. We've secured the perimeter and are tending to the wounded. 3 dead on our side, at least 7 of theirs." "And prisoners?" Alaric asked. 2, both injured. They're being held in the pack hall under guard." Alaric nodded, then turned back to me. His hand rose to touch my cheek, his thumb brushing away a smear of ash I hadn't realized was there. "You need to have those burns treated," he said, gesturing to my hands. I looked down at my palms, red and beginning to blister from the heat of the branch I'd wielded. In the rush of fear and adrenaline, I'd barely felt the pain. Now it throbbed in time with my heartbeat. "I have salve in my cabin," I said. "Lavender and comfrey. It will help." "See to it then," Alaric said, his voice softening slightly. "I must deal with our prisoners. Perhaps they can tell us why the southern packs have grown so bold." He started to turn away, but I caught his arm, ignoring the flare of pain in my burnt palm. "Your wound needs treatment too. It could get infected." A hint of that almost smile touched his lips again. "Worried about me, little wolf? Someone should be," I replied, matching his tone despite the chaos around us, despite the fear still coursing through my veins. "You're bleeding on ceremonial grounds. It's disrespectful." A short, surprised laugh escaped him, drawing startled looks from the warriors nearby. "I'll find you when I'm done," he said, echoing his promise from earlier. "We have much to discuss." As he walked away, flanked by his personal guard, I couldn't help but wonder what exactly there was to discuss. The events of the evening swirled in my mind like autumn leaves caught in a whirlwind. My humiliation at the ceremony, Alaric's unexpected interest, the attack that had turned celebration into bloodshed. And beneath it all, a question I was almost afraid to examine too closely. What did the Alpha King, the most powerful wolf in 7 territories, truly want with a half-human healer who couldn't even shift? I pressed my mother's pendant to my lips, seeking comfort in its familiar shape. "Your heart is your strength," she had told me. I hoped she was right, because in the world of wolves and politics and violence that had engulfed me tonight, my heart felt like the only thing I could truly rely on. My cabin stood at the edge of pack territory, not quite within the main settlement, not quite outside it. Like me, it existed in the in-between spaces, belonging fully to neither world. Tonight, I was grateful for its solitude. I pushed open the door with my shoulder, wincing as the motion jarred my burned hands. The interior was dark and cool, smelling of dried herbs and the lavender I hung from the rafters. Home. Safety. I fumbled to light the oil lamp on the table, its warm glow chasing shadows into corners. My reflection in the small mirror above my washing basin startled me. I hardly recognized the woman staring back, blonde hair falling from its careful arrangement, face smudged with dirt and ash, silver dress torn and stained. Alaric's jacket still hung from my shoulders, incongruously grand against my disheveled appearance. I slipped it off carefully, folding it despite the pain in my hands. The garment represented something I couldn't yet name, a connection, a possibility, a future I had never dared imagine. With practiced movements, I gathered what I needed from my stores, A clay pot of salve for my burns, bandages, herbs for tea to calm my frayed nerves. The familiar routine steadied me, even as my mind continued to replay the night's events. The ceremony, Alaric's unexpected attention, the attack. A soft knock at the door froze me in place. "Elise? It's Mira." Relief flooded through me. I hurried to open the door, nearly collapsing into my friend's arms when I saw her standing there, whole and unharmed. "Thank the moon you're safe," she whispered, hugging me tightly before stepping into the cabin. Her dark eyes widened as she took in my appearance. "Your hands. And your dress. Oh, Elise, what happened to you tonight?" I managed a shaky smile. "Which part? The public humiliation, the Alpha King's unexpected interest, or the Southern wolves trying to kill me?" "It's been an eventful evening." Mira guided me to a chair, taking the salve from my burned fingers. "Let me help with this," she said, unscrewing the lid and releasing the soothing scent of lavender and comfrey. As she gently applied the mixture to my blistered skin, she asked, "Is it true? What they're saying about you and the Alpha King?" "What are they saying?" I asked, suddenly wary. "That he chose you at the ceremony, that he took you away from the gathering, that you were with him when the attack came." Her fingers stilled on my palm. "That he fought 4 southern wolves to protect you." I stared down at our hands, hers smooth and unmarked, mine reddened and beginning to blister. "I don't know what to make of it myself," I admitted. "He said he saw something in me, resilience, a bridge between worlds. But it makes no sense, Mira. Why would the Alpha King want someone like me when he could have anyone?" "Because you're extraordinary," she replied simply, resuming her gentle application of salve. "You always have been, Elise. The rest of us just haven't always had eyes to see it." A lump formed in my throat. That's what friends are supposed to say. It's what the Alpha King saw, apparently. She began wrapping clean bandages around my hands. "And what those southern wolves feared enough to target you specifically." "What?" I tensed. "What do you mean?" Mira secured the bandage with a small knot. I overheard Nathan talking with the other alphas. The prisoners said they had orders to kill any half-breeds they found, especially any that seemed to have the Alpha King's favor. Her dark eyes met mine. "They're afraid of what you represent, Elise. A future where humans and wolves aren't separated by hatred and suspicion." A cold shiver ran through me. "Or they simply hate what I am. What my existence says about their precious blood purity. Perhaps both." She finished with the bandages and moved to brew the tea I'd set out. "But either way, you're in danger now. More than before." I knew she was right. If I had been tolerated but unwelcome before, I was now a target. The Southern Pack saw me as a symbol of everything they despised, and my connection to Alaric, however tentative and unexplainable, made me valuable as a way to hurt him. "I never wanted any of this," I said softly. "I just wanted to belong somewhere, to be useful." Mira placed a steaming cup of tea in my hands, careful of the bandages. Sometimes the moon has different plans for us than the ones we make for ourselves. We sat in companionable silence for a while, sipping tea and listening to the distant sounds of the pack regrouping after the attack. Howls communicating safety or warning, voices calling out names, the occasional clash of weapons being gathered or cleaned. "What will you do now?" Mira finally asked. I shook my head, uncertain. "Wait for Alaric, I suppose. He said he would find me after dealing with the prisoners, though that could have been just words spoken in the chaos." "He'll come," Mira said with surprising certainty. "The way he looked at you, I've never seen the Alpha King look at anyone that way." Before I could ask what she meant, another knock sounded at the door. Heavier this time, authoritative. My pulse jumped, and I exchanged a quick glance with Mira. "That will be him," she said, rising from her chair. "I should go." "No, please," I began, suddenly afraid to face Alaric alone. She squeezed my shoulder gently. "This is between you and the Alpha King now, but I'll be close if you need me." With a reassuring smile, she moved to the door and opened it. Alaric stood on my threshold, still shirtless but with clean trousers, a bandage wrapped around his torso where the southern wolf had bitten him. His personal guard stood at a respectful distance, watchful, but giving the illusion of privacy. Mira bowed her head slightly as she slipped past him. "Alpha King." He acknowledged her with a nod, then stepped into my small cabin, his presence immediately filling the space. I stood, suddenly self-conscious of my humble home with its bundles of drying herbs, its simple furniture, its distinct lack of anything befitting a visit from royalty. "Your wound," I said, noticing the bandage. "Did someone tend to it properly?" "Our pack healer did what he could," Alaric replied, his eyes never leaving my face. "Though I'm told you would have done a more thorough job." I moved to my shelves of supplies, needing something to do with my hands, bandaged as they were. The packmaster was always better with battle wounds than I was. My specialty is illness, not injury. And yet you confronted 4 southern wolves with nothing but a burning branch. There was something in his voice, amusement, perhaps, or disbelief. "Why didn't you run, Elise? Why put yourself at risk?" I turned to face him, clutching a jar of dried wolfsbane for no particular reason, except that it gave me something to hold. "They were going to kill you. They were going to try," he corrected, a hint of that predatory smile touching his lips. "I've faced worse odds, maybe so," I conceded. "But I couldn't just watch. Not when I could do something to help." He took a step closer, and I was suddenly, acutely aware of his partial nudity, the play of firelight on the planes of his chest, the raw power contained in his form. My mouth went dry. "That's twice today you've surprised me," he said, his voice lowering. "First at the ceremony with your honesty when all others preened and pretended. Then in battle with your courage when you should have been afraid." "I was afraid," I whispered. "I still am." Another step closer. "Of what?" "Of what happens next. Of what you want from me. Of what it means that the southern packs specifically targeted half-breeds with your favor." The words tumbled out before I could stop them. Alaric's expression darkened. "You've been speaking with someone from the council." Mira overheard them discussing the prisoners. I set down the jar of wolfsbane, my bandaged hands clumsy. "Is it true? Am I in danger because you singled me out?" He sighed, running a hand through his dark hair. "You were in danger the moment you were born, little wolf. Your very existence challenges their worldview. But yes, my attention has made you a more visible target." He closed the remaining distance between us, reaching out to touch my cheek with a gentleness that seemed at odds with his warrior's hands. "I'm sorry for that." The simple apology, more than anything, caught me off guard. Alphas rarely apologized. It wasn't in their nature. Yet here was the Alpha King himself, expressing regret for the danger his interest had placed me in. "What do you really want with me, Alaric?" I asked, forcing myself to meet his silver gaze despite the fluttering in my stomach. "The truth." For a long moment he simply looked at me, as if deciding how much to reveal. Then he reached into his pocket and withdrew a small object, holding it out in his palm. It was a stone, unremarkable at first glance, just a smooth river pebble. But as I looked closer, I saw that it was bisected by a perfect line, one half black as midnight, the other white as snow. "Do you know what this is?" he asked. I shook my head. "It's called a boundary stone. Ancient wolves used them to mark the borders between territories, but also to symbolize something more profound. The line between opposing forces, light and dark, safety and danger, war and peace." His fingers closed around the stone. "I've carried this since I was a boy. A gift from my grandmother who had the sight. She told me it would help me recognize the bridge when I found it." "The bridge?" I repeated, confused. "Between worlds, Elise. Between humans and wolves. Between the old ways and the new." His eyes held mine, intense and unwavering. "I've spent a decade trying to build an alliance that could withstand the hatred of those who fear change. But alliances built on political advantage are fragile things. They break under pressure. And you think I'm this bridge?" The idea seemed absurd. "I'm barely accepted in my own pack. Because you represent what they fear most. A future where the boundaries between wolf and human blur. Where the old hierarchies no longer determine one's worth." He took my bandaged hand in his, careful not to cause pain. "The southern packs fear it too, but for different reasons. They believe in blood purity above all else. The very idea of humans and wolves coexisting as equals, let alone creating families together, is anathema to them." I pulled my hand away, suddenly angry. So I'm a political symbol to you, a statement to make to your enemies and allies alike. To my surprise, Alaric laughed, a short, genuine sound that transformed his severe features. You really do speak your mind, don't you? No, Elise Winters. If all I wanted was a symbol, I could have chosen any half-blood from any pack. There are others, though few advertise their heritage as openly as you. Then what? I demanded. I told you before. I saw your resilience, your courage, your willingness to face judgment with dignity and tact. His voice softened. But there's more. I saw how you touched your mother's pendant when you were nervous, how you spoke of healing with passion but dismissed your own achievements. How you looked at the stars when you thought no one was watching, with such longing in your eyes. My breath caught. He had noticed all of that? I've spent my life learning to read people, to understand what drives them, what frightens them, what they yearn for when they think no one is looking, he continued. It's kept me alive through 3 assassination attempts and countless challenges. And what I read in you, Elise, is something rare and precious, a heart that gives without expectation of return, a spirit that bends but never breaks. He reached out again, this time to touch my mother's pendant where it rested against my skin. The brush of his fingers sent a shiver through me that had nothing to do with fear. The Alliance needs that kind of strength now more than ever, he said. I need it. Before I could respond, a commotion outside drew our attention. Raised voices, the thud of running feet. Alaric turned toward the door, instantly alert, his body shifting subtly into a fighting stance. One of his guards appeared in the doorway. Alpha King, forgive the intrusion. There's news from the western border. Another attack, bigger than the first. They've breached the outer defenses. Alaric swore under his breath. Casualties? Unknown, sir. The messenger was wounded. He said only that they come in numbers, with weapons we haven't seen before. A chill ran down my spine. Mira had mentioned something about this, rumors of the southern packs finding new allies with advanced technology. Alaric turned back to me, conflict evident in his expression. I have to go. I know, I said simply. He reached out and took my face between his hands, the gesture so unexpected that I froze. This isn't how I wanted this conversation to end, he said, his voice low and urgent. There's more I need to tell you, to ask you, but it will have to wait. Then, before I could react, he leaned forward and pressed his lips to mine, a kiss, both gentle and fierce, brief yet somehow endless. When he pulled away, I felt dazed, as if I'd been standing too close to a lightning strike. Stay here, he commanded, his voice rough. Bar the door. I'll send guards to watch the cabin. All I could do was nod, my lips still tingling from his kiss, my mind struggling to process everything that had just happened. He strode to the door, pausing on the threshold to look back at me one last time. In that moment, with firelight gilding his profile and determination hardening his features, he looked every inch the Alpha King, powerful, dangerous, destined to command. Yet something in his eyes as they met mine spoke of the man beneath the title, a man who carried a boundary stone in his pocket, and noticed when a half-human girl looked at the stars with longing. I will come back, he said, the words simple but weighted with promise. Then he was gone, leaving me alone in my little cabin with burned hands, a spinning head, and the lingering taste of an alpha's kiss on my lips. Sleep eluded me that night. I paced the small confines of my cabin, jumping at every sound from the forest beyond my walls. Alaric had kept his word about protection. I could sense the presence of guards outside, their occasional quiet exchanges a reminder that I was not truly alone. Yet isolation pressed in on me all the same. I touched my lips for the 100th time, still feeling the ghost of Alaric's kiss. What did it mean? Was it merely impulse in a moment of crisis, or something more significant? And why did the memory of it send warmth coursing through me despite the danger surrounding us all? Dawn broke with no word from the western border, no news of the battle that must have raged through the night. I changed into simple clothing, leggings and a loose tunic that wouldn't aggravate my burned hands, and braided my blonde hair into a practical plait. If trouble came, I wanted to be ready. A soft knock at the door startled me from my thoughts. I approached cautiously, calling out, "Who's there?" "Nathan," came the reply. "I need to speak with you, Elise." I unbarred the door to find our pack alpha looking haggard, with dark circles under his eyes and fresh scratches across his forearm. Behind him stood two of his personal guards, their expressions grim. "What's happened?" I asked, my heart sinking. "Is it Alaric?" Something flickered in Nathan's eyes. Surprise, perhaps, at my familiar use of the Alpha King's name. "The Alpha King is leading the defense at the western border," he said, his tone carefully neutral. "The situation remains fluid." "You mean we're losing?" I translated, reading between the lines of his diplomatic phrasing. Nathan sighed, running a hand through his graying hair. "May I come in? What I have to tell you shouldn't be discussed in the open." I stepped aside to allow him and his guards entry, watching as they performed a quick sweep of my small cabin before taking positions near the door. Nathan remained standing, too agitated to sit. "The southern packs have allied themselves with a group of humans," he began without preamble. "Hunters of a sort, but unlike any we've encountered before. They possess weapons designed specifically to target our kind, silver-infused ammunition, some kind of gas that disrupts our ability to shift." Cold fear trickled down my spine. How is that possible? Humans aren't supposed to know about us. "Someone told them," Nathan said grimly. "Someone who knows our weaknesses intimately." A wolf? The very idea seemed unthinkable. A betrayal of the most fundamental law that had kept our kind safe for generations. Secrecy above all else. Nathan nodded. "We believe a faction within the southern packs has decided that rather than adapt to a changing world, they'd prefer to see us rule it. They're using these human hunters as tools, promising them territory and protection in exchange for helping eliminate those they see as impure." His eyes met mine with meaning. "Half-bloods, sympathizers. Anyone who represents cooperation rather than domination." I sank into a chair, my legs suddenly unsteady. "And Alaric's alliance stands in their way." "Precisely. The Alpha King has spent years building bridges between packs, establishing trade routes, mediating disputes without bloodshed. Some see this as weakness. They want to return to the old ways. Territorial wars might make right." Nathan's expression darkened, "And they're willing to expose our existence to certain humans to make that happen." The implications were staggering. For centuries, wolves had lived alongside humans in careful secrecy. If that veil were torn away by widespread conflict, "What does this have to do with me?" I asked, though I feared I already knew. Nathan hesitated, clearly uncomfortable. "The prisoners we captured last night have been questioned. They revealed that the Southern Alpha, Darius, has placed a specific bounty on your head." My blood ran cold. "Why me? I'm nothing to them." "You are now," Nathan said bluntly. "The Alpha King chose you publicly, Elise. In their eyes, that makes you a symbol of everything they despise. Human-wolf cooperation, disregard for bloodlines, the new order Alaric represents." I pressed my bandaged hand against my mother's pendant, seeking its familiar comfort. "So what happens now? The Alpha King has ordered your evacuation to the Central Territory. His personal fortress there is the most defensible position in the Alliance. You'll be taken there immediately under guard." Nathan wouldn't meet my eyes as he delivered this news. "The caravan is preparing as we speak." "Evacuation?" I stood, anger flaring sudden and hot. "This is my home, my pack. I won't run away while everyone I care about is in danger." "It's not a request," Nathan said, his voice hardening into the tone he used when issuing pack commands. "The Alpha King was explicit. You are to be brought to him, unharmed, by any means necessary. By any means necessary." The implications of that phrase hung in the air between us. "Are you saying I don't have a choice?" "I'm saying," Nathan replied carefully, "that your presence here endangers the entire pack. The Southern forces will come for you specifically, and they'll cut through anyone who stands in their way." His expression softened slightly. "Elise, please, don't make this harder than it needs to be." I turned away, fighting the tears that threatened to spill. I understood the logic, but the emotion was harder to process. being sent away from the only home I'd ever known, just when the danger was greatest. "Can I at least gather some things?" I asked, my voice small. Nathan nodded. "Of course, pack lightly. The journey will be fast and potentially dangerous." As I moved around my small cabin, collecting essentials, a change of clothes, my healer's kit, my mother's journal, my thoughts whirled with questions. Was Alaric truly concerned for my safety, or simply protecting an asset he had publicly claimed? Did I even want to see him again, knowing that his interest had made me a target? Yet beneath the doubt and fear, something else flickered. A memory of silver eyes meeting mine, of gentle fingers on my mother's pendant, of lips pressed against mine with unexpected tenderness. Whatever Alaric's motives, I couldn't deny the connection I'd felt in those brief moments together. "I'm ready," I said finally, slinging a small pack over my shoulder. My entire life, contained in one bag. The thought was as bitter as it was surreal. Nathan nodded to his guards, who moved to flank me as we stepped outside. The morning air was crisp with early autumn, the scent of pine and earth and approaching rain so achingly familiar that I had to pause for a moment, breathing deeply, committing it to memory. A small caravan waited at the edge of the tree line. 3 vehicles designed for swift travel through forest terrain, with armed guards visible in each. I recognized Alaric's personal insignia painted on their sides, a silver wolf silhouetted against a full moon. My escort to a fortress I'd never seen, to serve a purpose I didn't fully understand. As I moved toward the lead vehicle, a commotion from the direction of the pack hall caught our attention. Raised voices, running feet. And then Mira appeared, her dark hair flying behind her as she sprinted toward us. "Elise!" she called, pushing past startled guards to reach me. She clutched something in her hands, a small wooden box intricately carved with moon phases and wolf silhouettes. "Wait, please!" The guards moved to intercept her, but I called out, "Let her through, she's my friend!" Mira reached me, breathless, and pressed the box into my hands. "I was afraid I'd miss you," she gasped. "They only just told me you were leaving." "I don't want to go," I whispered, blinking back tears. "I know." She squeezed my fingers around the box. "But you must. For all our sakes." She leaned closer, her voice dropping so only I could hear. "Old Jacob gave me this for you. He said you'll know when to open it, and that what's inside might bridge the gap when all seems lost, whatever that means." I looked down at the box, feeling its weight, heavier than its size suggested. "Tell him thank you," I said, tucking it carefully into my pack. Old Jacob had been our pack's keeper of lore, a respected elder who rarely involved himself in current affairs. If he had sent me something, it was significant. "Be careful," Mira whispered, pulling me into a fierce hug. "And come back to us when you can." "I will," I promised, though I had no idea if it was a promise I could keep. A guard approached, his expression impatient. "We need to move now. Our scouts report movement to the south." With a final squeeze of Mira's hand, I climbed into the waiting vehicle, settling into the back seat as the guards took positions around me. Nathan appeared at the window, his expression troubled. "Safe journey," he said formally. "Remember your pack when you reach the Alpha King's fortress." The strange phrasing caught my attention. "What do you mean?" "Just that loyalties can shift in new surroundings." His eyes held mine meaningfully. "Don't forget where you come from, Elise. Who your people are." Before I could question him further, he stepped back, signaling to the driver. The vehicle's engine rumbled to life, and we pulled away from the only home I'd ever known, leaving behind everything familiar as we headed toward an uncertain future. The journey passed in tense silence. We traveled forest roads rarely used, avoiding main routes where southern forces might have set ambushes. My guards remained vigilant, hands never far from their weapons, eyes constantly scanning our surroundings. No one seemed inclined to conversation, which suited my mood. I cradled old Jacob's box in my lap, running my fingers over the intricate carvings. What did it contain that might bridge the gap when all seems lost? And why had he chosen to send it with me now, when I was being whisked away to the Alpha King's fortress? As the hours passed, the landscape gradually changed. The familiar mixed forests of our territory gave way to denser, older growth, massive pines and ancient oaks that spoke of lands long held by powerful packs. We were entering the Central Territory, Alaric's ancestral holding, and the heart of the Alliance. Evening was falling when we reached the outskirts of a small settlement nestled against a mountainside. Unlike our rustic pack grounds, this was a proper town, with stone buildings and paved streets. Wolves in human form moved about their business, many wearing the silver insignia of the Alpha King's personal pack. They watched our caravan pass with curious eyes. Beyond the town, rising from the living rock of the mountain itself, stood a structure that could only be Alaric's fortress. A massive stone edifice with towers and walls that gleamed silver in the fading light. It looked ancient, yet impregnable. A perfect blend of tradition and practical defense. "The Moon's Keep," one of my guards said, noticing my awe. "Built by the first Alpha King over 5 centuries ago. There's no stronger stronghold in all 7 territories." As we approached the main gates, I saw evidence of heightened security. Guards patrolling the walls, checkpoints where our vehicles were stopped and inspected before being allowed to proceed. The tension in the air was palpable, confirmation that the threat from the southern packs was being taken very seriously. Finally, we passed through the massive gates into a courtyard bustling with activity. Warriors in training, messengers hurrying between buildings, servants carrying supplies, all moving with purpose and urgency. This was a fortress preparing for war. A tall woman with striking auburn hair approached as I stepped from the vehicle. She wore the insignia of Alaric II, the highest-ranking pack member beneath the Alpha himself. "Elise Winters," she said, her voice crisp and formal. "I'm Lena Greylock, second to the Alpha King. Welcome to the Moon's Keep." I nodded, suddenly self-conscious in my simple traveling clothes, with my small pack and bandaged hands. "Thank you. Is Alaric here?" A flicker of surprise crossed Lena's features at my informal use of the Alpha King's name. "The Alpha King is still at the western border, overseeing our defense. He's expected to return tomorrow." She gestured toward the main building. "In the meantime, I've been instructed to see you settled and briefed on the situation." As we walked through the fortress, I couldn't help but be impressed by its scale and design. Unlike the rustic, natural aesthetic of my pack's grounds, the Moon's Keep was grand and imposing, with soaring ceilings, massive stone fireplaces, and walls adorned with tapestries depicting wolf legends. Lena led me to a chamber on the 3rd floor, opening the heavy wooden door to reveal a space larger than my entire cabin. A 4-poster bed dominated one wall, with plush rugs covering the stone floor, and a fireplace already lit to ward off the evening chill. Large windows overlooked the valley below, offering a strategic view of any approaching forces. "These are the Alpha King's personal guest quarters," Lena explained, her tone carefully neutral despite the obvious implications of such an assignment. "You'll find clothing in the wardrobe, and a healer will attend to your hands shortly. Is there anything else you require?" I set my pack on a nearby table, feeling overwhelmed by the luxury and all it suggested about my status here. "Information," I said firmly. "I want to know what's really happening with the southern packs, what Alaric's plans are, and what exactly my role is supposed to be in all this." Lena studied me for a long moment, her expression unreadable. Then, surprisingly, her lips curved into a slight smile. "I can see why he chose you," she said. "Few would make demands within minutes of arriving as an evacuee." "I didn't ask to be evacuated," I pointed out. "I was given no choice." "Choice is a luxury in times of war," Lena replied, but without rancor. "Rest now. Change. Let the healer tend to you. We'll speak more over dinner, and I'll tell you what I can." With that, she left me alone in the lavish chamber, the door closing softly behind her. I sank onto the edge of the massive bed, suddenly exhausted from the journey and the emotional toll of the day. What was I doing here? How had my life changed so dramatically in the space of a single day? Yesterday, I had been preparing for a ceremony I'd expected to endure, not enjoy. Now I was in the Alpha King's personal guest quarters, a target for enemy forces, separated from everyone and everything familiar. I reached for my mother's pendant, pressing it against my racing heart. "Your heart is your strength," she had told me. I hoped she was right, because right now, my heart was the only thing that felt real in this strange new world. A heart that, against all reason, quickened at the thought of seeing Alaric again. Outside my windows, the sun slipped behind the mountains, casting long shadows across the valley. Somewhere beyond those mountains, Alaric fought for the alliance he had built. And here I sat, a half-human healer with bandaged hands, and a wooden box of unknown significance, somehow caught up in events far larger than I had ever imagined. Whatever came next, I knew with bone-deep certainty that nothing would ever be the same again.